Hello and welcome to another episode of the AutoTrader Podcast, SA's number one motoring podcast. My name is Wandile Sishi, and once again, as always, joined by George Mienie. How are you, George?
I'm good, and you, Wendy?
Not too bad. I woke up to some amazing news this morning.
Tell me.
I won the lotto. I play the lotto quite,
Let me just pause there for a second. And you're still here.
Well,
I feel flattered. I feel really flattered.
It was 225 rand, to be fair. But
Okay. All right, now that explains.
But I did actually win the lotto, so I feel good. I spent about 10 rand, and to get a return of about $200 is,
What return is that? 10 over 200 and... 200 and what? 225?
Like 2,000% or something.
225, 10 over 225. That is a fourfold. No, I lie. It is a 20-fold increase. 20-fold increase in
return.
Yeah, 22.5-fold increase.
It's like probably the best return that you can get in any sort of scenario where you
for sure.
Kind of betting on anything.
And how long? What was the period?
What do you mean? What was the period?
Like, when did you invest and when did you get the return?
So I maybe invested 2 days ago, which was about 10 rand, because it was 2 tickets.
2 days ago.
2 days ago. And then the lotto occurred, I think it was yesterday, and I got the announcement came this morning that I.
So what's that? 3 days, 4 days?
Yeah,
3 days. So 3 days. That's effectively 121.
doing maths.
Yes, I am. 22.5 multiple times divided by 3 days times 365. That is a 2,700 multiple.
Yeah.
Annualized. So,
and I mean, that's a big deal. It's not a lot of money, but I mean, it's what? It's about, I don't know, 10 liters or something in my car. So, I won a little bit. So I'm proud.
You got a 22-fold increase in 3 days. Like, who does that?
Yeah, the FBI's gonna be knocking on my door because, I found the secret.
The Securities Exchange.
Yeah. So today we have a really interesting topic. I don't know if you've been following this, but it seems that South Africa seems to be the only country that seems to be bucking global sales trends. So we know that
For what? Cars, I'm assuming.
For cars.
Yeah.
For housing. But for cars. So car sales in South Africa specifically seem to be doing fairly well, specifically in March. But globally, it seems to be the opposites. And I don't know if you've kind of read up on this as to why this could be potentially happening.
As soon as someone says that we're bucking the trend, first of all, I don't think it's unlikely. Quite often, South Africa is slightly different as a market.
Yeah, for sure.
We're smaller.
Yeah.
Much smaller than other international markets. But we've got to take something into account, I think, and that is what's happening in Europe. So asking ourselves the question, what's happening in America? What is happening in countries that are far away from that war? Is the same trend happening? Are we beating them? Because I don't know if you can look at Europe at the moment as being normal.
Of course.
From an economic point of view. Of
course. Well, I think there's another thing to just add to that is this is not specifically a 1 month thing. I mean, we've been seeing the increase in new car sales.
Yeah, but has the turnaround in Europe been kind of like overnight?
It has been overnight. So in Europe, that's the biggest impact is the fact that they are going through a lot of conflict, I guess.
Well, no, they've got a war happening with their neighbors.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of supply chain issues.
Exactly. So that's kind of the big issues. Whereas in South Africa, one, we produce a lot of cars here. A lot of the cars that are extremely popular and are aiding to this, we produce a lot of them. Secondly, there's new vehicles which I think in the market we just have taken up really well. Specifically the Havals and some of the Eastern OEM companies. And demand for them is just, we've seen it in our data as well. It's just been increasing to a point where it's actually trickling down into car sales.
Well, the Haval Jolian is an example, right?
It is.
It's a trend that I think is happening not only in China, not only here, but in other places.
For sure.
So the Chinese market is impacting our car sales positively.
100%. 100%. So just for context, there was about 50,607 different units that were sold in March of 2022, which is about a 16% increase year on year. If we go back to about a year ago, I think we're having a discussion earlier, Easter was kind of
same place.
Yeah. So we can't really use that as a, I think we can exclude that as a reason as to why last year may have been down. I just think that people in South Africa are buying cars. I mean, you've said it many times before that South Africans they love vehicles.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. We're at the southern tip of Africa, so oftentimes I think South Africa is so far removed
from everything else that's happening.
We're still a trade post.
Basically, yeah. For centuries and centuries, we've just been.
We're a trading post.
Yeah.
We're a stopover.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
So our market is really, really small. So it doesn't surprise me that we're more resilient the further away you are, and that's why I say, what is America doing?
So I mean, in America as well, they've also. I mean, there's an agency. I think it's called S&P, and they basically had to readjust their numbers by about 2 million vehicles from what they had predicted, because sales there has also gone down. So even in America, but I think America's kind of also involved a little bit in what's going on in Europe.
Well, no.
So yeah,
American sales in March.
Yeah.
This is 2022. Yes, fell by 22%.
Yeah.
So now America is
far away, but still
far away.
Experiencing the same.
But it's a big market and probably relies on a lot of the supply chain that comes from Russia and the Ukraine. I mean, one of the big things that I learned in the last 2 or 3 weeks is that most of the wiring harnesses for cars, particularly the VW Polo, come from the Ukraine.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
And making a wiring harness for a car, you think about the wiring harness. What is it? It is like your spinal cord and your nervous system. That's what the wiring harness is. It's very much not an automated process. It is very manually intensive. There's lots of labor. And car manufacturers are going to find that in the cheapest place in the world.
Yeah.
And apparently Ukraine is it.
I see.
And these wiring harnesses, if you go and look at the factories that they get made in, I mean, a wiring harness is a seriously intricate thing.
I was about to say, how complicated is it? Something that can be replicated, by an OEM that's not necessarily.
I don't think so. Not as easily. I mean, I don't think it's a complex task, but to set it up is complex and to learn. Yes. Yeah. I mean, remember, wiring harness, a big loom with lots of wires inside, with lots of plugs coming out of the harness at different points, plugging into the headlights, plugging into the dashboard, all those things in the back of the dashboard, your instrument cluster, your cooling system, your the sensors. I mean, we've got more sensors all over the cars, and those sensors have to. They don't speak wirelessly.
Yeah,
there's no.
They're all connected. Yeah,
the car doesn't use Bluetooth to communicate to the computer boxes.
Yeah, it has to be connected somehow. Yeah.
Bluetooth don't exist in cars for that reason yet. So it's wiring. The wiring harness or the wiring loom is where it's at. So I'm surprised that our assembly plants haven't been hit harder with the supply chain issues when it comes to wiring harnesses. I mean, if you look, I had a look at some pictures the other day of how they make these wiring harnesses.
Well, we produce a lot of cars here. I think we would, for instance, a Ford or a Toyota would be producing it themselves. They would be doing
in South Africa.
I would assume so.
Maybe
simply because they are complete manufacturers. Yeah.
Let's find out.
But whilst you're finding out there, something to note is I think it was Ford or Toyota, had recently closed down their factory because of a different issue that we're feeling here, which was the flooding in KZN. So I think that just how in Europe they're being impacted by this sort of the turmoil on the wall that's happening there. We have our own problems, and it's probably gonna in coming months we'll start to feel some of that. But right now, based off these two main things being the pent-up demand, which doesn't seem to be dying in South Africa, and the supply, it seems like we're doing okay.
Well, it turns out that Hesto harness manufacturers makes wiring harnesses for the automotive industry in South Africa, situated in Stanger in Durban. And Hesto is a publicly listed company on the Joburg Stock Exchange, big company.
Yeah.
And makes a lot of our wiring harnesses. So it seems like maybe we're shielded from this wiring harness problem.
Except the fact that the floods is happening in
KZN.
Well.
So we don't win.
If you don't get something, we get something else. We make our own problems.
So I mean, I hope Hesto hasn't been hit by the floods. Let's have a look because that's a double whammy.
Yeah, we know that some of the OEMs have been hit and they have had to stop production of vehicles in the country as a result. But how deep does it go?
Exactly.
How many things? How are we compounding these problems that we're having? Just something to note.
It doesn't look like Hesto has been hit by the floods.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I can't find anything. Doesn't mean they haven't, but I can't find anything.
So one of the big reasons why our sales is looking good. I don't know if you want to take a guess.
Take a guess on what?
On why? Well, the industry which is leading to automotive industry doing so well in South Africa.
Well, I mean. I would imagine there is a nuance in South Africa, which is more than likely rental cars.
There's no getting around you. You just know everything. It is definitely rental cars. So they make up about 11% of the sales that happen in March.
We've got to admit that rentals in South Africa are a big deal. I mean, we're a big country and we don't have public transport infrastructure. So when people travel, they have to. The rental industry, I recently traveled to Cape Town and KZN before the floods. Yeah. I'm lucky I missed it. But you had to pre-book a rental car. There were no rental cars.
Pre-book like months ahead?
No, like a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks ahead. But if you had pitched up at the airport and you wanted a rental car, you'd battle.
Wow, that's interesting to know. So definitely, I guess more people are traveling now and they just need more cars, because it's not to say that demand for rental cars is up. I don't know that. I just know that the sales, as you know,
demand for rental cars has to be up, because I mean, if the sale of rental cars are up 11%, right, and the total growth in new car sales is up 16.5%, that means that only 5.5%
is elsewhere.
Is outside of rental. So therefore, exactly. But the actual passenger vehicle sales to the consumer in the street is not as buoyant as rental car purchases.
But rental car purchases don't happen as frequently. Like that's what I'm saying. It could be
spikes and dips. Yes.
Yeah, like fleets. Basically, they're renewing their fleets. Rental companies, because we do know that they after a year or two they do change.
That's why taking a month in isolation is a bad idea. You got to take quarter. You got to take a quarter into account.
Because last month we did see an increase still. But with we're not going to see the rental companies making up 11% of total sales next month, for instance. I doubt it, at least.
But you might see the results in a quarter in terms of the real trend, or even on an annual basis. How rental companies, what percentage of rental companies contribute to the growth.
Agreed. So top 10 best-selling brands locally. Do you want to take a guess, or can I just read them out?
Put me out of my misery.
Well, number one, still Toyota. They've been doing exceptionally well. They're one of the only few who has kind of stayed in that position. When we looked early in the year, we saw that Volkswagen had dropped from that position, and they're still at the second place. So yeah, I think those two brands are the ones which are doing best, and I think they're going to stay there. Third place is Hyundai, fourth Suzuki, and fifth Nissan. But Haval does make up the list at a cool 8th place.
They've got into the top 10.
They've gotten into the top 10. We did predict this about a year ago, that we're going to start seeing them really, really climb these ranks. And to be at 8th place is huge.
These 2,036 units.
Yeah.
How many of those are Jolian?
Not too sure. I'd have to confirm. But I would guess that it's a lot. It's going to be the Jolian, and I'm not sure if the GWMP series is.
Let's tweet that split to the 2036 in the next couple of hours after this goes live.
Yeah, for sure.
What is that split of that 2000? I'll be very keen to understand
if it's basically
it's the Jolian.
Yeah.
The Jolian plus one other.
like a cash cow.
Like GWM something,
Yeah, the P series.
the P series, or is it an even split across the Haval brand? Interesting. So who have they displaced?
So they have displaced. I know Porsche was there at one point in supercar sales, but in terms of overall, I would have to just confirm.
No, who's out of this top 10?
Just
we've got Toyota, VW. Where is BMW?
BMW's not there. Mercedes Benz is not there.
So one of them have been displaced
for sure.
Because Mercedes Benz and BMW used to be on this list.
For sure, I think they were both on this list. I know Nissan just dropped the new Navara. Which is doing really well. I know in searches, for instance, the Navara is the fastest growing double cab in terms of searches and popularity. So
but they're very high up on the list. So I'd be keen to see who's new on this list. Haval we know is, but there's got to be one other to have displaced BMW and Mercedes.
Agreed. So just to kind of sum up the segment show, do you think this is just a 1 month in isolation and we should just wait a little bit as an industry?
Yeah, I don't think you can take 1 month as an indicator of long-term trends, although it is an indicator of the start of something. If you really want to see whether Mercedes and BMW are displaced, look at a quarter, look at 6 months. I would say taking 1 month into account. It's a good month for Haval, and I've got no doubt that that's going to extend to the quarter and to the year because we've seen that over the last months.
Yeah.
But are there any other cars on this top 10 list that are a blip in the matrix?
I have a few theories.
Yes.
I just how I love data and I love kind of watching behavior really. And if we look at the different things that have kind of hit us, inflation rates has gone up. There's
interest rates gone up.
Fuel prices have gone up. The floods have happened, but still it seems Ukraine has happened. Semiconductor shortages have happened, but it still seems to be kind of stabilizing or not being being hit as hard as some of the other nations.
Well,
so I think
we saw this in lockdown. South Africans' car demand just doesn't change.
We just love cars.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a love of cars or it's just we need cars.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happens in our country, we need the ability to get from A to B. And I'll bang this point home again. We do not have a public transport infrastructure. Yeah. The only public transport infrastructure that is really effective is the minibus taxi infrastructure, if you can call that an infrastructure. Other than that, we don't have proper taxis. Uber's expensive.
Yeah.
Lyft is expensive. Gautrain is only limited.
In Gauteng, yeah.
So people need their cars.
Yeah.
And it's cheaper to go on holiday to Durban in a car than it is for the family than it is to fly.
To fly, of course.
So we're a very unique nation when it comes to owning cars, I think. And besides the love of cars, there's a need for cars.
I think there's definitely a case study there or some sort of research because things aren't getting cheaper. You would think that in a third world country, this sort of, the increase in price and the increase in standard of living would have a direct impact.
Are we third world or second world?
I would say we're second world because I've traveled a little bit and, but let's just say third world.
Yeah, I've been to a few third world countries. I don't know. You know what? I think we have all worlds in this country.
Yeah, that's
we're
true.
First, second, and third world.
Yeah.
Because of the growing income gap, growing poverty gap.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, we have all three.
100%. But let's see what happens. I think we'll just keep watching it and seeing. We know that searches and performance on the AutoTrader website is still extremely high. So I think it indicates that the market is very much still in safe hands at least. Moving on the topic still of car sales. There was a very interesting article that I found on the website on AutoTrader.co.za, which was, do you have to register and license a car as soon as you buy it?
Well, because I know the answer to this, you've got a predetermined amount of time in order to make sure that car gets into your name. And the bottom line principle is there are two sides to car registration.
Yeah.
Okay. And people often forget the other side. And the other side is car deregistration. So effectively, when someone sells a car,
Yes.
they'll send a document into the licensing department to deregister the car.
Okay.
Okay.
As the seller.
As the seller, I have sold this car. Boom. If you don't take that car onto your name within a predetermined amount of time, the car gets deregistered.
Automatically?
I would assume.
Okay.
Because there's two sides to this transaction.
Yeah, there's obviously the seller and the buyer. One that needs to deregister the vehicle, and one has to register.
And not deregister the vehicle like forever, in the day. It's really just take the.
Name, yeah.
It's not on their name, so it's on nobody's name.
Yes.
Okay, so the car's not. So it's deregistered from somebody. Like, it's not on anybody's name.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in the ether.
And are you saying there's a time period between when this needs to happen for the transaction to go through, or it doesn't really matter?
21 days.
21 days. Interesting. I'm glad. Yes, you really do know everything I'm going to tell you. So what I found is that there's two key things to understand. There's a registration process when you are buying from a dealership, and then there's a second for when you're buying privately. And I think the process that you go through is different for both. For dealerships, the big thing is they want to get that vehicle out of their name as fast as they possibly can, just to give, not have the liability anymore. Whereas privately, I think a lot of people who are buying privately don't understand that the process is slightly different, and it's not necessarily in the best interest of the seller to do all the paperwork for you. So there's certain nuances that you need to kind of be aware of, just to protect yourself and make sure that you're not dealing with a vehicle that's not necessarily in your name. For the seller specifically.
Well, I mean, as a private seller, the thing you need to do is first of all send that document into the license department.
Yeah.
But also, when you sell the car, make sure that the buyer signs a document that takes responsibility for all fines, responsibility for the car. What if the car's used in a bank heist?
Yeah.
And it's still on your name as the seller, and you haven't submitted that document, or you haven't got a document to prove that I sold this car.
And vice versa, if you're a buyer, make sure that there are no fines, or the car was previously used in a bank heist, and that you're not kind of inheriting that problem now.
Exactly. So that kind of switchover is very important, because the police will come after whoever that car's owned by
At the time.
At the time of, whatever. I mean, let's say I've sold you my car and it's been involved in a bank heist, right? And it's still in my name.
Yeah.
Or I sell you. Let's put it this way: I sell you the car. It's still in my name. You go and do a bank heist. I haven't changed ownership.
Yep. I just leave it in a ditch somewhere.
You just leave it in a ditch. Police are going to come pitch up at my door.
Yeah.
So
as a seller, it's in your best interest to make sure that you have done the due diligence and ensure that the crossover to the new owner is done.
I would say there's two things there. One, on the day that the person takes possession of the car, make sure that document is completed to deregister off your name.
You must see it, make sure that you can see that it's been done and not...
No, you got to do it yourself as the seller. Okay. So it's a document you got to fill in as a seller,
okay.
Yes. So make sure that that's done. Second of all, have another contract that makes the buyer take responsibility of the car, for the car, and agrees that this car has been sold at this time, at this hour, I'm taking responsibility.
Including everything that comes with, I guess, this vehicle.
Yes. What if they drive out of your premises and go and do 170 kilometers an hour on the freeway, and a camera snaps them? Where's their fine going to go?
It's going to go to you.
It's going to go to you. Exactly.
So would you recommend that if someone's buying, or let's use sellers in this scenario, just to keep in theme with this, would you recommend someone who's selling their car privately to allow somebody to buy the car there and then and drive it off? Or are you saying that they must have these two agreements to make sure that in a case where somebody does get a fine, speeding, the liabilities
It's
still
shifted.
stands. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't let somebody take possession of your car unless you've got 3 things. The deregistration, document done and dusted. Not necessarily submitted, but at least signed and dusted. A document that both of you sign, that the new owner has taken responsibility in all aspects for the car.
Okay.
The money in the bank,
Of course. Yeah.
which is probably item number 1.
Of course.
Otherwise, do what Wendy does. Go and win the lotto.
Go with a lot of. Definitely. That's pretty much all we have.
I think the headline for this episode should be
Wendy
won the lotto. I think it'll get a lot of engagement.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, George. Super interesting. And yeah, have a good week.
You too.
Thanks.
Lotto stars.